let us move on, Sam, to Sleep Token. It's going to get the time written down here, 42:30. Right, okay. So, very, very interesting moment of the podcast, Sam. Sleep Token. This place will become your tomb. It is out on September 24th. Also, via Spine Farm Records. What a time to work at Spine Farm Records, right? It is the band's second album and the follow-up to 2019's Sundowning. So, Sleep Token, mate, I don't think there are many moments that are going to stand out to me for as long as we do this podcast, as much as that opening day when I told you about Sleep Token. I was like, right, we're reviewing this album called Sundowning by Sleep Token. 90% of it is already out on Spotify because they've released each song weekly. Listen to it, let me know what you're saying. And within like 5 minutes, you were like, dude, I can't believe this. This is amazing. And me and you just went on and on basically all morning talking about the record. We saw them live. That only kind of enhanced our love and adoration for the band. They are a real unique entity in alternative music, which is incredibly difficult to do. They're not the first band to wear masks, but they're the first band that obviously we weren't around for the real boom of Slipknot. By the time me and you got in, by the time I got into Slipknot, I already knew who all the members were. I never want to find out who the Sleep Token members are. I think their anonymity is a real cool thing about them. I think the fact that some of their label executives and some of their management still don't know what they look like. They're fully buying to the concept. And that concept is most closely linked to vocalist Vessel's kind of vision for the band. Now, what I want to say and ask you kind of going into this record, Sam, Sundowning was like the cool new toy that we've never really seen before. I guess it was kind of like being 4 years old and seeing Buzz Lightyear on the shelf and being like, what is that? That looks amazing. That guy's got wings. Like, we were listening to Sundowning and like, oh my God, this is really cool and outlandish and out there. Because of that, Sam, do you feel underwhelmed at all by this record? And if you do, how closely linked is that to the idea that Sleep Token aren't the shiny new toy anymore, and now they're just building on a concept that was already laid and heard?
Underwhelmed is a tough word, because I still think this is excellent.
Right.
But it's not as good as Sundowning, but Sundowning was arguably one of the best albums of the decade. So it's kind of like following the alternative music's equivalent of Mona Lisa, as far as I was concerned. It was just how would you draw another woman? Cool. It's a tough one. I don't think it though. It's just because of Sleep Token's lack of sheen that I don't think it's there, that they're no longer the new band, because I was incredibly excited to hear this.
Yeah.
And if anything, my anticipation for the second album had been built up because the first one had been so good. It's not as good because it's not as good. Not because of any sort of psychological barriers that I placed on myself in advance of listening to the record. If anything, my expectations were higher because of the Sundowning. But then looking back, I was talking to Jack about it, that Sundowning felt like an event with the singles being released the way that they were. And you could tell there was a real confidence in the band with their first album, and there was like a significant gap between the singles that they'd released as EPs, and then there was a long period of time, like 2 years or so, where it's clear that they were piecing stuff together to release in this type of way. Obviously, this is with hindsight, as I'd heard them before the album came out, before me and you decided to review them, but not in the same depth or extent whatsoever. I'd heard they did a good cover of Hey Ya and a couple of other tunes. But moving towards this, underwhelming is a tough one for me to agree with. I think it is 85% as good as Sundowning. I think the middle chunk of this album doesn't quite match up to the middle section of Sundowning, but that, I think, emphasizes how great that first album was, and how really I have not experienced a band that have gone from literally nobody knows who they are to these are one of the most exciting bands I've ever known in the course of 18 months. That trajectory, I don't think I've really seen in this era, actually.
I also think that calling this record underwhelming would be harsh. However, I feel like that conversation is going to be an inevitable one, because I'm with you that this isn't as good a record as Sundowning, and that immediately sounds like a criticism, but then you have to contextualize that with how could it be? Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure really how Sleep Token could have created something that sat on that same barrier as Sundowning. But maybe not for you, but for me, Sundowning felt so unique that I couldn't help but just feel overwhelmed with a sense of enjoyment in how different it was. And hearing Vessel's voice for the first time, just being kind of like stargazing at how is this person doing this? I can't believe the depth and dexterity of this person's voice. And obviously when you listen then to This Place Will Become Your Tomb, I'm going in kind of wanting another Gods, wanting another Sugar, wanting another Bloodsport, wanting another The Offering. And this album doesn't deliver as consistently as Sundowning does, but when it hits its moments, my God, Sam, this album is incredibly moving.
I would agree. I was saying to you 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I had a little bit more time than yourself to listen to the album a couple of weeks ago when we first got sent it, and I tried to quickly jump in. And we were speaking on the way to a gig, and I turned around and said to you, man, it's bookended by 2 classics. Two utter masterpieces. Atlantic, I would actually go further and say that that's the best Sleep Token song I've ever heard.
I think it is. I think I agree with you, Sam. I think it's the best song they've done.
Which we've just said that it's not as good as Sundowning, but there's a song in it that's better than anything Sundowning's produced. Yeah. So there's a juxtaposition there. Obviously, one song doesn't make an album, but this by no means is a disappointment. It'd be like if you said to me, I always use the Metallica analogy because I know them best, but if you said to me, Masterpiece is the best album, but one is my favourite Metallica song, and I think that's the best song they've ever written, I wouldn't argue really with that. I'd be like, cool, that's fair enough, that's a good shout. And this is the way I feel about this. This is just an utter masterpiece. The piano at the start is gorgeous, utterly gorgeous, and the way Vessel's voice floats in and around those notes before the final crescendo is just it is dazzling. I had goosebumps listening to that. The first time, real goosebumps, hair standing up on the back of my neck and on my arms and stuff. It's that affecting, and it's the sort of song that make you tug a friend of yours and say, you've got to hear this, I don't care, and make you grab people close to you and say, can you try this and listen to this? And Sleep Token did that the first time. I remember showing parents and friends like Levitate when I first heard it and thinking, I've never quite heard a band like this. And I feel that way with Atlantic, and I think that's there again. And I feel that way with the concluding number, which I wish was 7 minutes long. The fact that ends at 3 minutes 21 seconds, I think, is like a crime, because it's just utterly gorgeous. And again, when Vessel finds a certain melody that allows him to sort of show off his delicate range, and the band can apply these sort of textured sounds over what is going on, it's just utterly capturing this like syncopated looping vocal. He's able to just effortlessly come across, and some of the lyrics are just fantastic. And there's many more highlights for me. I think obviously the singles are great. Alkaline's terrific, and Love You Want is fantastic. Alkaline is a classic Sleep Token song that could have fit on Sundowning quite easily. It's got every, if we could say that Sleep Token have tropes after 2 albums, but it's got the electric keyboard sound, the unique vocabulary. Like, you can tell Sleep Token write the lyrics because he feels like he swallowed a thesaurus, like using words like missile dying. Like, nobody does that. Like this thunderous staccato guitar where it's metal but not quite, and his vocal looping over the top of that metal vocalist, like hypnotic, unabated. The contrast is always something that Sleep Token have been masters of. A Love You Want is almost exactly the same. It's a well-chosen single. It's a beautiful chorus. And the crescendo at the end of this, do a band do better end of song crescendos than Sleep Token, where they've got 3 or 4 different vocal lines ongoing. If there is a band that does that better, I haven't heard them. And that's just fantastic. But the problem that I've got with it is, I hate saying this because I love this band, but Chris, there are 4 album tracks on here.
I was going to say this, dude. There's a fair bit on this record that...
There's a lot of fluff, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, the moments on this record that drop into like the dark R&B sound, what are your thoughts on that? For example, like that, the song, what are your thoughts?
I like it once, but then after 3 times, it feels like you've written the same song 3 times.
Right, see, this is where I was going to go. This is where I was going to go. So like that dark R&B sound, which could probably, the moments of this record where you can genuinely picture that being from early The Weeknd works. Switch around the vocalists and it would make sense, right? And the first time you hear that, you like Wicked Man Vessel delivering on something different again. But actually, this record kind of sits around that concept a few times. I'm curious what you think of the kind of 808s and Heartbreak Kanye West effect on Vessel's voice on Fall For Me. Is it for you or is it not?
I enjoyed that.
Right,
but then you kind of hear it again later. And that's the thing. Like, apart from the like that, Distraction, Descending, Telemeras, all are much of a muchness for me in varied worlds. And I think they're good songs individually, but when they're chunked together, it does feel like they've written 3 or 4 incredible songs, and they've written 3 or 4 ones that will just fill out the album. And I love this band. I do. But could they have waited a year? Did this have to come out this year? Could they have waited a year and written 3 more terrific songs, right? And then that one of these, the best one's the album track, that you just don't really mind that much. And then they have another Take Aim, they have another Offering, they have another Bloodsport that makes this more special. They could have ridden out Sundown for another 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
But like, this is what I was talking about. So Distraction, nice opening vocal melody, right? It's good, but it feels deliberately stripped back. And it feels like it's looking for a gear that it doesn't have. And concluding with the fading vocals is lovely, but we've been here before.
Yeah.
Fall For Me is lovely vocal organ section. I like the contrast, but it misses a final gear, and it just seems to end like after 3 minutes. I'm like, oh, there's nothing. That's it. Like, and I feel that well. Like Descending actually is where I actually felt that I think it's the worst song on the album. I felt it was a bit meandering. I really did. Like, I felt, oh, this is too similar to Distraction. The Distractions just happened. I felt that they've gone for a blueprint on this album. They've gone for a style. And whereas when I thought Sundowning was 10 to 12 individual songs that were good enough to be singles, that's why they did that. They don't feel it's, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but if
I don't think you are.
But if the band are not doing the same thing that they did with Sundown and that built that reputation, right? And they're just bringing out 2 or 3 and then dropping it all in a chunk. Doesn't that kind of tell you that the band also don't feel this material doesn't quite match up? Because either that or it's the world's first example of a band losing confidence in itself after success, which has literally never happened in the history of music or success. It's that's where it comes across to me. Again, we had this conversation after one too many cocktails at the weekend, shall we say? And I was saying that I think this is really, really good at its best, but there's moments of this that are like as good as Sundowning, but there's a lot of it that's like 60%, 70% as good, and that's actually the largest chunk. Like the songs that are the highlights, there's less of those than this middle bit. There's like a fatty center from like tracks maybe 4 to 8 or so, and I could go without. If you release this as an EP and said we'll see you in a year, and it was just Love You Want, Alkaline, Atlantis, and Missing Limbs, I'd be salivating.
Yeah.
Absolutely salivating. And the others are just extras or whatever. But obviously not going to do that. So my conclusion is a couple of things. And again, excellent album, really. And the highlights are enough that if we were still doing scoring, this is an 8.5.
Yeah,
because of the highlights.
Yeah.
Because an album with some of the songs on here can't be a bad album. It just weighs too much. But there are four songs that if I wasn't reviewing it and I was just listening to the background, they just kind of meld into another. And I've listened to this, 4 or 5 times over the last couple of weeks because I actually wanted to do this. The first couple of times I heard it, I was like, oh, I love this song, and the rest I'm not too sure. I need to re-listen. And then it didn't quite get me then, and nothing's changed.
I literally have got a note here, Sam, that for telomeres, I've literally written, I feel like at this point of the record, this style of song has been played out fully on this album. I never thought I'd say that about a Sleep Token album. I know it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say because they've only done one album, but Sundowning was so varied and so infectious that I just assumed there would never be a Sleep Token album that comes out where I would write a note saying, I feel like they've done this enough now on this record, because again, the dark R&B sound is really cool when it first hits, but it hits a few times. I don't think there was one particular sound or one particular soundscape that hit on Sundowning more than like 5 times. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just so varied and so different. Mm-hmm. I think this album would have benefited from Another Gods or another song in the style of Gods. Hypnosis, the second track on the album, is probably the heaviest on here. And Sleep Token aren't strange to 5-minute+ songs, but that song's got a real like kind of slick way of building its intensity. And when Vessel drops these kind of hypnotic psych style vocals, again, you feel kind of whirlwinded in, and the breakdown on that song is absolutely insane. There's this kind of foul guitar line, which is straight out of Humanity's Last Breath of Iljata book. Awesome. How can you not be in? I like Mine. I think that's a bit of a stunner. Vessels, these are kind of centerpiece, these layered climbing synths, which I'm not sure what else you could want from a Sleep Token song. Vessel is a center point with the synths climbing behind him. Some gorgeous drum notes on Mine as well. I don't ever want to know what the members' names are, but I wish I could just say something other than the Sleep Token drummer, because my God, that guy deserves recognition because he's amazing.
That octopus in a cloak at the back of the stage.
He deserves recognition, man. He's ridiculous. When I mentioned Fall For Me to you, and I really like that song. I think they did a clever thing in having it as the shortest song on the album, because I'm not really sure where else the track could have been taken once it gets past that like 2.5 minute point. That was a clever note. I think that High Water is a great tune that would have done better being higher up on the track listing, because it offers something quite different to the rest of the record. And I think that instrumental in the middle 8 has got an astonishingly good riff. It's kind of crushing, but also like really pristine, clean. I think the album would have benefited from that being higher up to kind of break up I sound like I'm kind of repeating myself here, but the dark R&B sound. But Missing Limbs, Sam, if you're going to finish a Sleep Token album from now on, I think they should all be acoustics. Because
or all be that one. I listened to that album. That album goes forever.
Oh my God, Missing Limbs there is no adjective for how beautiful that song is. It is.
Sleep Token have just messed around and written the greatest pop punk acoustic song ever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like it's perfect. It's utterly perfect.
And I think, Sam, I said to you that I think underwhelmed still is a harsh kind of adjective to use to describe this album. But with that said, that's my personal opinion, because I think that this is still an 8 out of 10, and it would be it would be like one of the astronomical achievements, full stop, in music in the 21st century, had Sleep Token have followed up Sundowning with another album on the same level of. But I can't help but escape the feeling, Sam, that some fans aren't going to be as welcoming and as fair, and are kind of going to look at this as, by no means a misstep or a backstep, but kind of look at this as a sideways step. What do you think? Is it a sideways step?
Probably. Well, if it hasn't advanced, then
Yeah,
it's not backwards. There's no other.
Well,
there's no
yeah,
other alternative.
yeah. By definition, it would be a sideways step, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Do you miss the screaming? There's no screams. There's no deathly vocals at all.
I think that. I think it could have done with the gods.
I think it could have done with
descending. Take out descending and put a gods on. Do you know what I mean?
I think he could have done with like a few songs where he dips into that as part of what the song already is. Like I kept thinking, like "Love You Want" that repeated the chorus at the end, and I was expecting him on one of these choruses to do that thing that bands do, where the vocalist changes the style of his voice when he does the melody again, and he sings the same chorus in like a rougher way, or he allows a rough vocal to go over and cascade around the main melody or whatever it might be. He just doesn't. It just gets repeated. It appears to be a song, a few songs that are deliberately designed to be more malleable for a listener, which I think is actually going to isolate a few sections of their fans that actually like Sleep Token because they were a metal band who also did some melodic stuff really, really well, as opposed to a melodic band that also dip into some metal stuff, and they appear to have switched that round on this, which is not surprising. I mean, it's inevitable that bands do this sort of thing. But yeah, it misses an edge and a grittiness that Sundowning had in abundance that this unfortunately doesn't.
With that said, just as we close off here, Sam, I do just want to reiterate that this is a great record nonetheless. It's just
absolutely.
It's not Sundowning. It'd be unreasonable for us to expect it to be Sundowning, but there is, let's just call it what it is. This is a sideward step, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a sideward step nonetheless.